The evening sun cast long amber shadows across the dashboard as 87-year-old George watched his 15-year-old granddaughter, Maya, climb into the car with a hollow expression that seemed to swallow the light around her. She wasn't crying or shouting. She was simply flat, a vibrant soul turned grayscale by the heavy realization of her own perceived insignificance. When she finally broke the silence with a question that had haunted George for decades, asking if anything one does actually matters, it sent a tremor through his aged bones because he recognized that existential ache. George began to reflect on his 9 decades of life, thinking about how our modern world is dangerously obsessed with leaving a mark or changing the world in grand, noisy ways that often leave the soul empty. He realized that Maya, at the start of her journey, was looking for a mountain to climb, while he, at the end, was looking at the pebbles that had actually paved his path. He thought of his neighbor Margaret, a simple schoolteacher who lived a life that many would call ordinary or even forgettable. Margaret never sought the spotlight, never wrote a bestseller, and never held a position of power. She simply showed up every day to teach third graders. When she retired, the gymnasium held only 30 people, and her passing was quiet, yet her funeral became a revelation of hidden greatness. The church was packed to the rafters with doctors, non-profit leaders, and parents, all testifying that Margaret was the one who had seen them when they felt invisible. George understood then that Margaret hadn't tried to change the world. She had simply changed the person standing right in front of her, and those ripples had expanded into a tidal wave of impact she would never witness. This was the first lesson he wanted Maya to grasp, that the things which truly matter rarely feel like they matter at the time, because they are disguised as routine, duty, and quiet attention. True significance isn't found in the applause of a crowd, but in the silent gratitude of a single heart that was moved by your presence. George realized that we have life backwards, chasing the ghost of impact while stepping over the gold of genuine connection that lies at our feet every single day. As the car rolled slowly through the quiet streets, George's mind drifted back to his own darkest chapter when he was 39, a time when he felt like a catastrophic failure whose life amounted to nothing but broken dreams and empty bottles. Money was tight, his business was crumbling, and he found himself sitting in a cold car outside a bar, contemplating drowning his sorrows in a way that might have ended his story prematurely. In that pivotal moment of despair, a man named Tom, whom George barely knew, knocked on the glass not with a sermon or an intervention, but with a simple invitation for coffee. They sat in a nondescript diner for 2 hours, and Tom didn't ask George to fix his life or demand an explanation for his misery. Instead, he talked about the mundane, his kids, a book he liked, and a trip he had once taken. That ordinary conversation acted as an anchor, pulling George back from the ledge and shifting the entire trajectory of his life, yet Tom likely forgot the encounter by the next morning. George realized that this is the fundamental truth of mattering. It is almost never dramatic, and it never announces itself with a notification or a trophy. You might do something that feels incredibly small to you, like sharing a cup of coffee or listening to a stranger, and yet it might be the very thing that keeps another person's world from falling apart. He thought of his late wife Eleanor, who spent her life writing physical letters to friends, family, and even distant cousins, a habit George used to tease her about in the age of telephones. It was only after her passing that he discovered boxes of replies, revealing that those simple letters were the lifeline for dozens of people during their loneliest hours. Eleanor wasn't trying to be exceptional, she was just being present, and in doing so she became the foundation of so many other lives. George wanted Maya to understand that she didn't need to be extraordinary to be essential, because the pressure to be exceptional is a weight that crushes the beauty of being human. The world is held together not by superheroes, but by people who return shopping carts, parents who stay up with sick children, and friends who check in when they notice a flicker of pain in someone's eyes. George looked at Maya's profile in the fading light and remembered a summer many years ago when her own father was just a small boy terrified of the water. For 3 weeks, George had spent 15 minutes every day just standing with him in the shallow end of a pool, never pushing, never lecturing, and never demanding that he swim. It was a tedious, unglamorous exercise in patience that no one else saw and no one would ever win an award for, but it was the quiet constancy of his presence that eventually dissolved the boy's fear. Now, as a grown man, his son probably didn't even remember those specific 15-minute sessions, but George knew that his decision to stay present in that small struggle had changed his son's relationship with the world. This was the quiet power of mattering. It's knowing that your presence or absence makes a real difference to real people, regardless of whether they acknowledge it. George realized that most of what people chase, status, achievements, and recognition, is nothing but smoke that vanishes the moment the wind changes. People will forget your accomplishments faster than you can imagine, but they will never forget how you made them feel, or that you chose to see them when they felt invisible to the rest of the world. He shared with Maya a recent encounter at the grocery store where a young cashier looked exhausted by the weight of the world, her eyes heavy with the burden of double shifts and a sick mother. George could have just paid and left, but he chose to stop and truly ask how she was, offering a few words of validation that her struggle was honorable. It didn't change the global economy or solve her problems, but for 3 minutes she was no longer a ghost in a uniform. She was a person who was seen. That small, unremarkable act was a brick in the wall that keeps society from crumbling into cold indifference. George understood that mattering is found in the unglamorous moments you'll never post about on social media or put on a resume, such as choosing patience over anger or telling the truth when a lie would be easier. It is the steady, quiet work of being human with other humans, a task that is far harder than seeking fame because it requires us to pay attention when we are tired and to care when it is inconvenient. The car finally pulled into the driveway and George turned off the engine. The silence between him and Maya, now feeling heavy with a different kind of weight, a weight of understanding. He looked at his aged hands and told her that at 87, he no longer thought about the awards he had won or the recognition he had once craved, because those things had no warmth in the twilight of his life. Instead, his mind was filled with the faces of those he had loved well, the moments he was fully present without needing credit, and the conversations where he had truly listened. He realized that the question, "Does anything I do matter?" is often a trap because it seeks a grand, measurable answer, whereas true mattering is personal, quiet, and lived in the small spaces between us. He told Maya that her life didn't have to be a spectacle to be significant, it just had to be honest, present, and kind, which is the most profound legacy anyone can leave behind. The ripples of a kind word or a patient moment echo forward into eternity, touching lives you will never meet and influencing generations you will never see. George saw a spark return to Maya's eyes, a realization that the light inside her wasn't out, it was just waiting to be shared with the person right in front of her. He understood that as long as he had breath, his purpose was to continue being that quiet ripple, to offer his presence to those who felt lost, and to remind them that they are seen. He encouraged her to stop looking for the mountain and start looking at the people in her life, the friends who are hurting, the strangers who are tired, and the family who needs her smile. Every small act of integrity and every moment of genuine connection is a victory against the void of insignificance. As they stepped out of the car, George felt a sense of peace, knowing that his life's meaning wasn't recorded in a history book, but was written in the hearts of those he had touched. He had finally answered the question that had rattled in his head, and in doing so, he had given his granddaughter the compass she needed to navigate her own journey. The world would keep spinning, obsessed with its loud achievements, but George and Maya now shared a secret, that the smallest light can pierce the deepest darkness, and that being human together is the only thing that has ever truly mattered.